Panama Canal 22 years ago. First, we go to the bottom of things and find ourselves sidetracked on the floor of the world-famous Gaillard Cut, which perhaps is more familiar to you under the name of Culebra Cut. Now we are traveling along some of the 160 miles of track that were laid down on the bottom of the canal, track that constantly had to be shifted as the shovels dug away at Mother Earth. Right at this spot in the picture, modern Grace liners float on a watery bridge that rises 45 feet from where these rails are. In the distance now, the lines of tracks are to be seen, and also one gets an idea of the width of the canal. Originally specified to be 200 feet in width at the bottom, President Roosevelt, TR that was, ordered the dimensions changed to 300 feet, costing the United States an extra $13 million, and well worth it. Local and white labor were employed in the building of the canal, the white labor being called the gold standard, the native labor the rest. Here's one of the native signalmen. The government kept one of these men, flag in hand, at every switch in Culebra Cut. It had to, for every minute and a half during the peak of activity in Culebra, a train loaded with dirt rumbled on its way to Gatun Dam and locks. And despite that, it was almost impossible to keep enough empty cars on hand to tax the capacity of the 101 steam shovels used. We don't want to bore you with figures, but in passing we might mention that the government used over 300 locomotives and over 4,000 cars of rolling stock in this work. Now we are approaching the most famous part of the Culebra Cut. First, a full view of the cut, showing something of its depth, with the steam shovels biting away at it and each chewing off as high as 7 cubic yards at a bite. These particular shovels are working on the famous cucaracha slide. Cucaracha in Spanish means cockroach, and this slide was particularly annoying and disturbing. It was a so-called wet slide caused by the rains and the slipping of soft, wet dirt on a hard layer of rock underneath. The cucaracha in October 1907 slid right across the bottom of the cut, buried 2 shovels, and for 10 days moved an average of 14 feet every 24 hours. But that was just one of the many things that came up in the building of the canal that were overcome with little fuss and furor, and all the time the shovels kept nibbling away. This is one of the locomotives used to haul the dirt trains. We might add, as we wait for one of these many dirt trains, each with 21 loaded cars to pass, that the canal has experienced some 20-odd slides, all told, totaling 25 million yards of earth and covering 220 acres of cut and destroying 200 miles of track. Some of these slides came during the dry season, and they were caused by faults in the earth, breaks occasioned because of the removal of sidewalls and the cutting of the canal. In short, there was nothing to keep the sidewalls from expanding into the cut, which they promptly did. A few moments ago, we said that the government used 101 shovels. Some of them were left by the French, who, under de Lesseps, builder of the Suez Canal, first started work back in 1882. These, however, are good old American shovels. They are working here just past the sheer face of Culebra at the lowest point of the cut, the very real bottom of the Panama Canal. The loading of the empty dirt trains is done very quickly with those big dippers, and don't worry, the shovels always dig themselves out. These objects are some of the 553 rock drills that were used for setting the dynamite shots. 6 million pounds of explosives a year were used in the cutting of this gigantic ditch during its 9-mile length. That would make a real Chinese New Year's party, wouldn't it? In the distance now are to be seen 2 famous spots. On the left is Gold Hill, and on the right, Contractor's Hill. It is said that it was from the top of Gold Hill that Balboa first saw the Pacific Ocean, but that was a long time ago, and, well, you know how people will talk. At each end of that suspension bridge, around 1910 and 12, there were a couple of sizable little communities, contractors' camps they were. But with the completion of the work, they were demolished and not a vestige remains of their presence. This looks like a desert stream in early spring, but it's really the first water ever to enter the Panama Canal proper, finding its way into it from the Chagres River. The Chagres Basin is now filled by Gatun Lake, formed by the man-made, low-lying Gatun Dam at the Atlantic end of the canal. And once again we view the face of Culebra Cut, showing how it looked back there in 1912 at its highest point. They took 37 million cubic yards of dirt out of Culebra, and the cost, well, it's difficult to get actual figures, but the entire canal had an estimated cost of some $375 million. Yes, we know that all